Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, your home of all things stock, investment, and personal finance related. In today's video, we're pleased to welcome Charles Allen back to the program. He's the CEO and chairman of BTCS. A really exciting interview here. Before we get into it, take a second, hit the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comments section below if you're currently holding shares of BTCS and your thoughts on this company moving forward. With that being said, let's get into today's interview. Okay guys, that's right. Today's video, backed by popular demand, we have Charles Allen, the CEO and chairman of BTCS. Now it's been a few months since you've been on, Charles. I think mid-August you were last on the program. I greatly appreciate you stopping by and looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, no, it's great to be back. I appreciate you having me.
Of course, yeah, this space is moving so quickly. Obviously, Friday of last week, a major event in the crypto space. We're going to get into that in a second. I did want to ask, since we last chatted in August, obviously a lot going on in the sector as a whole. Can you talk to us about any key developments within BTCS?
I can't talk about anything that's material because we haven't put our earnings out, but we've been trying to be a lot more active on the investor relations side and communication side, especially with institutions. So we've always been pretty active on social media, but also reaching out. So we've been to a lot of conferences. Unfortunately, we didn't make the token 2049, but we've got a pretty packed deck of events coming up in the coming months. So that's going to be it'll be good just to get out there and so people can become familiar with the company. And we're pretty excited about getting our earnings out as well and for Q3.
Most definitely. In terms of the earnings date, I know you don't have an exact date nailed down. When would we expect those? Early November?
It's typically mid-November, so it's 45 days after the period end. I suspect with the amount of activity we've had in Q2, right? We've raised, over 140 million on the ATM, deployed that capital. We have a tremendous amount of growth in the quarter, and so the auditors are going to be, busy, so it's going to be probably close to the deadline. So I wouldn't expect us filing, weeks early. I'd say we're probably a couple days, if not, close to the deadline.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And at least we know kind of when to mark the calendar. Now, you just mentioned some institutional conversations. I had the pleasure of meeting up with you in New York a few weeks ago at the H.C. Wainwright conference. Each company there did a presentation. Yours was great, a full room, packed house for that one. Can you talk to us a little bit about the interest you're seeing from institutions? Obviously, Bitcoin has really broken out into the main stage here over the last few years. Ethereum hot on its trail, and there was a lot of excitement about these DATs or digital asset treasury companies, specifically on the Ethereum side.
Yeah, no, so I think there's a lot of just general institutional interest in the space. It's now going far beyond Bitcoin. I mean, you were at the same conference. There was a whole panel on digital asset treasuries. Most of them were Ethereum focused, and there was a packed room. I mean, there literally was like, people standing in the back. And these are a lot of that, the people in that room represented a lot of larger institutions. So we're definitely seeing that adoption. I think that's fueled by a positive regulatory environment. And so yeah, overall, I think it's really a nice on the overall side having that institutional interest. On the BTCS side, we finally around I think Q2 of this year jumped from a 35 million market cap to a close to 300 million. I mean, obviously it fluctuates. And I think that's helped us get a lot of institutional interest, whereas before we were primarily a company that was held by retail investors, and now I'd say, at the lower end of relevant for institutional players. The stock has liquidity. We trade on average $10 million a day. I don't see that going anywhere. So that's been great to see. Larger institutions take interest, put us on the radar screen, and are excited about the business model. And the meetings I've had, it's always kind of eye-opening. A lot of institutions be like, "Wow, I hadn't heard of you guys," or "Wow, I didn't realize you're doing X, Y, and Z," which is far in advance of what some of the other companies are currently doing.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, we'll get into this a little bit later in the conversation, but unlike a lot of these kind of new entrants on the scene, BTCS, you guys have been in the space for a long time. You've got block building, you've got node operations, a lot more aligned maybe with the fundamental strategy and network of Ethereum. When you're having these discussions, do the people generally have a good understanding of Ethereum, how the network works? Are they generally kind of newer to the story? How do those conversations look?
It's across the board. I've had some investors that really don't know much beyond that, Ethereum's another, cryptocurrency. A lot are getting much more sophisticated, which is it's really great to see. So when you sit down with an investor, you're not educating them on like what Ethereum is, what Bitcoin is. It's, hey, this is what we do within the ecosystem. And so that's really that's been a great development, and I'd say in the last, 6 to 9 months, where institutions actually understand the business model beyond just, hey, you're buying this token and holding it. I think on the block building side, that's still an area where, it's a complicated business model to explain. It's for us very important. It's high revenue growth. It's kind of fueling our operations. The staking most people get, but even that, it's like, the smarter questions have like, well, who are you staking with? And it's like, no, no, we don't do that. We don't go to a Galaxy Digital. We don't go to a blockchain. We do that ourselves because we have the expertise to do that. Um, we actually run nodes for Rocket Pool, which is it's about a 30 to 40% increase in your revenue for staking by doing that. And so it's great to see the institutions come in and be interested in learning more, and we're helping educate them. And I think we're not, looking at the other digital asset treasury plays specifically around Ethereum. I imagine many of them will look at other revenue generating operations within the ecosystem because, unlike Bitcoin, there's a whole economy that's built on Ethereum. Bitcoin's more of a digital gold. When you look at Ethereum, it's like, well, okay, you can actually build a business within the ecosystem, and there's room for everybody, right? It's not a winner takes all. It's not a zero sum game. There is room for all of the public, digital asset treasury companies to operate within that space and even have very distinct and different business models. And I think, we're kind of aligned on the blockchain infrastructure, and we're looking at some other ways to generate, revenue, high margin revenue as well. But that to me is what's exciting, is to be able to differentiate like that and have, institutions start to take notice.
Yeah, it is crazy to see how much activity is related around Ethereum now. Obviously, a big social media person, and seeing the amount of activity, talks, discussions, excitement about the space is really something. Now, you just made reference to the fact BTCS has been around the block, no pun intended, for quite some time. I wanted to get your take on last Friday. This was a monumental day in terms of the crypto markets. We saw equities markets around the world really retreat. You've been through a number of these type of crashes before. A lot of people view them as a real challenge. Some companies view them as an opportunity. Can you talk to us a little bit, both from your personal lens, just as someone experienced in the industry, and as the CEO of BTCS? How do you look at events like this?
I guess I'll answer your question in the two parts was asked. So from a personal lens, I've been around a while. I lived through the internet bubble, bursting in early 2000. I was an investment banker for the 2008 financial crisis. So I've seen the worst. This is what I would view as a blip. In the time in crypto, BTC has been public since 2014. So in that, 11-year period, we've lived through most cycles. So looking at what happened on Friday, and I don't know what the exact catalyst is, hard to kind of put your finger on it. Maybe it was the, 100% tariffs on China or some other, events that caused it. It's an opportunity, right? Like I was kind of bummed. I was at dinner on Saturday, Friday with my family and not able to action on it. But come Saturday, we purchased, I think it was $1.5 million worth of Ethereum in the, low 3,800 range to jump on that opportunity. And that's not material, so it's not, relevant. We're not putting out an 8K or press release on it. But it was something that we looked at like, hey, here's a great buying opportunity. So I don't, it would have been great if it come down lower, right? Because it popped right back up and now it's back down. And I think that's just, we have a long-term view on where Ethereum is going and where blockchain technology and cryptocurrency is going in general. And so when you have that view, you just zoom out, right? Once you zoom out and you go, okay, there's a blip, that's an opportunity, let's seize it. Or hey, maybe we didn't have for companies that don't have the resources to capitalize on that, maybe they miss it. But as long as you have a balance sheet that can survive the long term, these short-term swings really don't matter. And so for us, we had some concerns that like, hey, because we've borrowed on Aave, are you going to get liquidated? And the answer is no. We're highly over collateralized. Even if we were to get fully liquidated on Aave, we would still have substantial assets and we would just be turning back the clock like 6 months. And so we're, based on, publicly available information, I think our liquidation price on Aave is like 1,800. So it would have to be, and that's a pretty steep price for Ethereum to go, and we would still be okay, right? That we still have other assets. We would still be, it would just be a smaller company, right? If those were to go away. Where we are today is we had a great buying opportunity. I wish I got it Friday, but I was at dinner and we got it Saturday. It was still good pricing. And so we've got a share buyback in place. We've got a strong balance sheet. And so I'm not terribly worried. I think the regulation in this country is going the right direction. I don't see the institutional adoption, both from an operational standpoint and from a funds flow perspective, slowing into blockchain or Ethereum. So to me, it's kind of a non-event apart from the fact that we got to buy a little bit of cheap ETH.
There you go. Yeah, it's always nice to hear kind of experts' opinion when we see those black swan events or kind of crashes. Now, that was a great segue to the next question here. On Ethereum or strategic Ethereum tracker, you guys are showing just north of 70,000 Ethereum. You mentioned you just made a small purchase over the weekend there. BTCS, at least what you've told us in previous interviews, very focused on strategic acquisition. So you don't want to necessarily be buying the top like Sailor or buying spot any chance you can. You just mentioned a great example of that over the weekend. What type of targets or goals do you have in terms of Ethereum accumulation over the over the rest of this year and then looking out a bit further?
We haven't put out publicly any targets. I think our strategy probably differs than some of the other players, right? Like if you look at, I think BitMiner is a great one. Their goal is just to acquire as much as possible. And it seems like, and that's fine, right? Like they're selling off their ATM. It seems like probably daily, regardless of price. For us, it's much more strategic. I'm the largest shareholder. I want to create wealth for myself and my shareholders by stock price appreciation, not by dilution. I think you could probably, the way Bitminers, I think it'll probably work. But I'd like to see, more exponential growth. And I think that's going to be driven by operations. And, we're on a quarterly reporting cycle with operations. I think in the end, if we can show a path to generating very high revenue and build a profitable company, we should trade at a multiple that is a premium to whatever our digital asset holdings are. And so that's where I think my focus is how do we build a business that's going to not have us looked at as a digital asset treasury and your only asset is you own a bucket of ETH. Like to me that's nice, but it's not really what I would do. I don't want to run, an ETF, right? Because I think then the only thing you can do is hope that the underlying goes up, which I think ETH will go up, but I'd much rather build a highly scalable business that's going to help us accumulate ETH faster and drive a higher valuation to benefit our shareholders. And I think that means in trying to do that, we're not going to be the biggest in terms of balance sheet. And that's okay. Because if we can have stock price appreciation and be a smaller market cap, assuming we're relevant, right? I think we've hit the lower end of relevant, where institutions are interested. That's a much more compelling, plan for us.
We've talked about that a number of times on the regular podcast. It's hard to differentiate yourself when you don't really have an underlying business and you're just accumulating Bitcoin or Ethereum. You just mentioned your operations are a key point of difference for BTCS. You've got Node Ops and Block Builder. I've got to imagine kind of a rising tide lifts all ships here. The more DATs and people get excited about Ethereum, this obviously really helps your underlying business or your operations. Can you talk to us just quickly about Node Ops, Builder Plus, outlook, margins, anything you can share there?
Yeah, so I think you're right. A rising tide rises all ships, right? I mean, if there's larger DATs just deploying billions and buying ETH up, it'll help the price go up, and it'll benefit us. Um, as far as operations, we have two key businesses. One is NodeOps, the other is Builder Plus, and we're working on a third. I can't really say much beyond the third. There's a lot of accounting work that goes into doing that. We figured out a lot of the technical aspects, and we've identified opportunities. The question is, can we fit that, square peg of DeFi into the round hole of U.S. public companies? And I think we're very good at that. We've been doing it longer than anybody else, and we tend to get it. We try to get it right, and even when the SEC thinks we've got it wrong, we've had scenarios where we've gone and appealed and won. So we're doing a pretty good job in that front. And so in terms of outlook, Builder Plus was 80% of our revenue. The margins weren't great in the last quarter because we pushed pretty hard. I'm gonna be kind of cautious what I say here. We're anticipating better margins for Q3, and things are going well. I'll leave. That's about as much as I can say for before earnings come out. Um, but yeah, so that's the operations. I think it just takes time on a quarterly reporting regimen. We can't say more before we're ready. We have to have the statements reviewed. We can obviously have updates with press releases, but those historically in this kind of frenzy when all these DATs were coming out over the last couple of months, we're like, okay, we have X Ethereum, we've raised Y capital. Now that things have kind of stabilized, we're trading at a discount to our net asset value. There's not really much to say. It's let's get heads down and build, and communicate the value proposition of the company to institutional investors and stay relevant as well on kind of with the retail investors.
Yeah, I appreciate the context, and I know you're kind of limited until earnings come out. Now, I did want to get a follow-up on the Dividend. This is another kind of pioneering move from BTCS, specifically the loyalty payment. You mentioned last time, not only would you get the Dividend, but people could be eligible for an additional one-time loyalty payment if they actually transferred their shares over to book entry. Can you give us an update on both how the feedback of this Dividend was as a first in the industry, and then progress on the loyalty payout?
So I think the dividend was successful, right? I mean, we can never, there's only certain things we can do to address the stock price, right? This was one where we were, heavily shorted. The short interest has come down. I love to see huge jumps, but like, I don't have a crystal ball. It's historically worked in the past. I think we talked about that when we did the first dividend. The stock went up like over 140%. So, it's kind of like if you make Jaws 2, is that going to sell as well as Jaws 1? Probably, right? Like the sequel always usually works. In this case, we didn't have the same reaction, but the stock has climbed up since announcing it, and so I don't know if that's directly correlated to that action. But either way, we're able to give back to shareholders. So from a process standpoint, the Ethereum dividend's already been paid, so that was super fast. We processed that within a couple of days of the record date. There's a lot of reconciliation we had to do. I still need to, you know, if people haven't received an email yet, we have not sent out hey, you got your dividend, but it's in their wallet. So that's actually done. The cash dividend doesn't go out till the 17th, but we've paid that. So it's sitting in this old school system of, getting weight. I don't know if it goes to Seed and I think it goes to Seed and Co. And then they have to distribute to the brokers and they don't pay to the date. Well, it'll be curious to see what happens on the actual payment date, because that's when the short sellers have to pay. But so that was successful. As far as the loyalty payment, really it's a question of those shares being held in book entry through January 26th, and that'll be a seamless process as well. But over to your question, I think it was relatively received well, right? Like when you're trading below NAV, you have a couple options. You can do a buyback, you can pay a dividend, and you can, stand on a soapbox and try to tell people how great your company is. And so we're doing all three.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've heard a lot of other CEOs actually looking or interested in this type of a payment or dividend. So it's great to see you guys leading the way there. You just made reference to MNAV as well. I guess kind of my final question for you today. We've seen DAT's MNAV come down across the board, regardless of what the underlying is. Where, in your opinion, do you think this sector will kind of settle out? My opinion is maybe the DATs with not a ton in terms of operations, closer to one. You may see a premium on DATs with some sort of aligned or successful underlying operation. But I wanted to get your opinion there before we close out.
I think you're spot on. My view has always been, unless you have a compelling business that justifies a valuation above your asset value, you're probably going to trade near your asset value. Now you can do, some financial engineering, which I think, Michael Saylor's done an amazing job with this, with strategy of, well, let's add this pref and that pref and this convertible note, and figure out how to slice and dice, your capital structure in a way to trade at a big premium for your common holders. That you can only do so much with that. I think, we're doing a lot with that on the DeFi space with using Aave. So yeah, to your point, I agree. I think at or near NAV is where most of these trade. If you've got yield because you are staking, you're in a token that stakes, maybe you get a little bit of a premium, but then you've got to take into account the operating expense of a management team versus what you would pay on an ETF. And so what's really interesting is as there's more and more players in the space, the the opportunity to kind of differentiate yourself. If you don't take that opportunity, you're going to get arbitrage to NAV because I know I've spoken to investors say, well, hey, I looked at this DAT and all they're doing is buying this token, and well, I'll just buy the ETF that has that token and short the stock, and it's a free arb, right? Now they won't do it on chain because they can't do it in a brokerage account, and then they're kind of net short a position. But if you're actually doing it within a brokerage account, you're kind of balanced out. And so you're seeing, I imagine we'll see a lot more of that. I imagine as we see tons of companies come in that do the exact same strategy and they trade at different valuations, you'll buy one, short the other. And so, the market will try to, bring balance and good price discovery across the board on these things. And so that's why our focus has always been on, hey, we've got to do more, we've got to be more than just buying and holding, ETH or any tokens for that matter.
Makes sense. Yeah, we've really seen some big swings across the board there, so it's great to get your insight. That's it for my list. I know you mentioned earnings coming up mid-November there. Anything else in terms of events or conferences we should have on the calendar for BTCS?
I'll be at the Futures Conference and then a couple investment banking conferences in the spring. I don't remember the exact dates off the top of my head, but that's if anyone's there, that'll be a good time. I think I'm going to be I'm either speaking or on a panel. I forget off the top of my head. Again, it's a 6-8 weeks out. So
Sure. Yeah, great. And more institutional attention, like we kind of started the conversation. So we appreciate you stopping by. You guys, if you have additional questions for Charles or the team at BTCS, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. Charles, always great having you on the program. We look forward to reviewing earnings soon.
all right, great. Thanks for having me.